Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to give an update on North Carolina's preparations for Hurricane Isaias. Although the track and destination of the hurricane are in flux today as models differ, now is the time for North Carolinians to prepare. Hurricane preparations will be more complicated given the COVID-19 pandemic, and families and businesses need to keep that in mind as they get ready. Based on its current speed and path, the hurricane could reach our coast as early as Monday, making its greatest impact Monday night and maybe even into Tuesday. Already, there's a threat of dangerous rip currents at our coast, and the danger of tropical storm force winds is increasing. The State Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, already activated for COVID-19, has been activated as well for Hurricane Isaias, and state and local response teams are at the ready. And today, I've declared a state of emergency to help our state prepare. Please follow any local evacuation orders that may be issued. We're urging anyone who has to evacuate to try and stay with family and friends. And if that doesn't work, staying at a hotel if you can afford it as the first two options. The state will coordinate shelters for those who need to evacuate who can't find other arrangements. The reason we're asking people to make shelters their last resort is because social distancing and precautions that go along with a shelter in a pandemic. Because of our ongoing battle with COVID-19, people needing a shelter will be screened for symptoms and given personal protective equipment like masks at the shelter. If someone has symptoms of COVID-19, the state has different sheltering options available where it's easier for people to isolate. With the right protection and sheltering, we can keep people safe from the storm while at the same time trying to avoid making the pandemic worse. A hurricane during a pandemic is double trouble, but the state has been carefully preparing for this scenario so that we can do our best to keep people safe from the weather as well as the virus. I'm grateful for our state emergency response team and all of their efforts to prepare, including the Know Your Zone evacuation strategy. The goal is to look back and say, we overprepared. And that means we must not be caught off guard. I'd like to ask our Director of Emergency Management, Mike Sprayberry, to share more about our state's preparations. Mike?
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your leadership. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is day 144 of the COVID-19 response at the State Emergency Operations Center. As of 0800 this morning, the State Emergency Operations Center is now activated for both Hurricane Isaias and the ongoing COVID-19 response. That includes partners like the State Highway Patrol, the North Carolina National Guard from our own parent agency, the Department of Public Safety, as well as other partners from other state agencies like DOT and DHHS, our federal partners from FEMA, nonprofit partners like the American Red Cross, and private sector businesses that participate in the North Carolina Business EOC. We are coordinating closely with our counties, especially those near the coast, as they make preparations and finalize any decisions about evacuations, sheltering, and other preparations that will be needed. We're making sure our swiftwater rescue teams and other response assets are ready and that they have the PPE they need to operate in the COVID-19 environment. We're also preparing to push packs of commodities like water, food, and tarps to place where they're needed. Now is the time that we all need to be personally prepared for this storm with a plan and an emergency kit. In your emergency kit this year, be sure to include face coverings, hand sanitizer, and cleaning products to help keep your family healthy. Visit readync.org for a complete list of items to include in your emergency kit. The Ready NC mobile app has been retired, but all of the same emergency and preparedness resources are available on the mobile-friendly readync.org website. As the governor was talking about, sheltering's going to be different this year. As I've stated before, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused some changes in the way we are looking at evacuations and sheltering. Here's how things will be different this year. We ask you to review your evacuation plan and follow these steps. If told to evacuate by your local officials, evacuate as requested. Evacuate the shortest distance possible. Get out of the impacted area. Due to the pandemic, try to stay with family, friends, or a hotel to minimize contact with others. If this isn't possible, go to a shelter. If you live at a safe place inland, please do your part and offer to let family or friends evacuate to your home. Both non-congregate and congregate shelters will be opened this season for evacuees who require sheltering support. Local governments and the American Red Cross are working to implement health screening, social distancing, and cleaning protocols in shelters to prevent the spread of the virus. Many of our county partners are planning to make earlier decisions on evacuations to give more time to execute these evacuation plans during the COVID-19 pandemic. As always, you should follow your county government website and social media channels for instructions involving evacuation and reentry. The governor talked about the Know Your Zone program. It's also in effect this year. 20 coastal counties have developed coastal evacuation zones based on areas most at risk due to storm surge and river flooding. Please visit knowyourzone.nc.gov to see if you live in one of these zones. If you do, remember your zone and listen for it if evacuations are needed and ordered. The zones labeled A are red in the Know Your Zone maps. They are the highest risk areas and likely to be evacuated first if needed. The B zones are slightly lower risk, and so on. Again, that's knowyourzone.nc.gov to determine if you are in a new coastal evacuation zone. By following these steps, we can all stay safe during Hurricane Isaias and the rest of the hurricane season. With kindness and cooperation, we'll all get through this together as one team, one mission, and one family. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mike. The last few months have not been easy, but I appreciate all of your team's efforts to make sure North Carolina is ready for anything that comes our way. I'd also like to recognize Colonel Glenn Mcneill, the commander of the North Carolina State Highway Patrol. Colonel Mcneill.
Thank you, Governor Cooper, for your leadership. Thank you to the Department of Public Safety Secretary Eric Hooks, as the State Highway Patrol joins our DPS partners in formulating a response plan to this storm to assist residents and visitors alike. A message to all who are currently along our coastline: please keep informed of storm-related information at readync.org and plan ahead by learning your evacuation routes at drivenc.gov. As always, turn to the multitude of valuable resources available online, such as the Department of Public Safety's website, the Know Your Zone information, and please keep our emergency phone lines open for true emergencies. We stand ready to surge into impacted areas at a moment's notice. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Colonel Mcneill, to you and your troopers for your work in keeping our residents safe. We will hope for the best, but prepare for the worst with Hurricane Isaias. As this storm draws near, please stay tuned to your local forecast and any updates from local emergency managers. We'll continue to update as needed from Raleigh. Also with us today is our Secretary of Transportation, Eric Boyette, Major General Todd Hunt, the Adjutant General of the North Carolina National Guard, and Cody Kensley, one of our deputy secretaries at the Department of Health and Human Services. Lee Williamson and Karen Magoon are our sign language interpreters. And behind the scenes, Jackie and Jasmine Mativier are our Spanish language interpreters. We'll now take questions from the media, and if you can identify yourself and your organization, we would appreciate it. And we'll take our first question.
Our first question will be from Michael Hyland with CBS 17.
Hi, Governor. This is Michael Hyland from CBS 17. I want to see if you all could elaborate. You mentioned that there will be a different sheltering option for people who have COVID-19 symptoms. Can you go into more detail about what exactly that means and what will they have access to?
We're encouraging people to make plans to try and stay with family and friends. That's the first option. And if you can afford a hotel that's out of your evacuation zone, we urge that second. And the last option would be going to a shelter, and we're going to have those ready. One of the precautions that are being taken is that people are screened at a reception center, a screening center, where temperature will be taken. And if they have symptoms, then they're going to be sent somewhere to be isolated depending on their condition. It could be a hotel, it could be a medical facility. I'll let Director Sprayberry add to that. He says that's got it, okay? So next question.
Our next question is from Lynn Bonner with the News and Observer.
Hi, Governor. This is Lynn Bonner from the News and Observer. I've got a multi-part question. Are COVID testing efforts being suspended in areas where there are hurricane watches and warnings? And the other question is, we've seen places where families have gotten together, and that's been a situation where people are infected. So I'm wondering if there are any recommendations for people when they evacuate for self-imposed quarantine when they get to a family or friend, and what they might do when they return home.
So we know that we have a lot of testing areas that are up and operating, and they'll be guided by the weather, but I'm going to have Deputy Secretary Cody Kensley of the Department of Health and Human Services to address that question. Cody?
Thank you, Governor, and that's absolutely correct. We will be monitoring the weather actively, working with our partners here in emergency management, and for testing sites that we have planned on the eastern part of the state, we'll work to move those and modify their operations or reschedule them as necessary to make sure that we can watch out for the weather and keep people safe. As to the second part of the question about family members that may be staying with other family members, we'd encourage folks to go to our website to see the guidance that we have for normal experiences where you may be exposed potentially. We won't necessarily be changing that feedback as far as what people should be doing to be separated from their family after the fact, as far as quarantining and isolating.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Our next question is from Jonah Kaplan with ABC 11.
Hi, good afternoon, Governor and the emergency team. Jonah Kaplan here with ABC 11. I wanted to ask you about some of the staffing issues related to shelters and also the message for, it's kind of a balance, right? You want people to evacuate, but then not do it unless it's the last resort, so people maybe stay home. How do you juxtapose those two things when the shelter's a last resort, so then people say, all right, well, we'll just stay home?
Well, first, if you're ordered to evacuate, we want people to evacuate. We just want them to consider first staying with family and friends, and second, if they can afford it, to try to get a hotel. That's the only thing different about this. We do not want people to stay where they are if there is evacuation order in place. The reason that we're putting those first two options out there is because we know we're going to have space challenges with congregate shelters, because I think there's 115 square feet per person, right, Director Sprayberry? So we know that we're going to get significantly fewer people inside of a shelter than you normally would, so that you can keep the social distance and do all the things you can do to slow the spread of the virus. So we do want people to evacuate. You mentioned volunteers. It's an issue. Particularly a lot of our shelter volunteers, Red Cross volunteers, are many times older people. There have been fewer of them who want to volunteer considering the COVID crisis. So we do want people to step up and volunteer, and I might let the director address that issue as well.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Jonah. It's good to talk to you again. Staffing is always a concern, even during regular disasters without COVID-19 for shelters. But what I would tell you is that while we do have anticipated reduced staff for American Red Cross for their volunteers for shelters, they are still decisively engaged in the fight. And so we will have American Red Cross staffing at shelters. Secondly, we are working closely with our partners at the Department of Health and Human Services, and they have a division of human services where they have a number of volunteers that have stepped up to the plate and volunteered to assist in sheltering operations as needed. Third, there's local volunteers. There's going to be some shelters. We've been talking to our counties today. Many counties are planning on standing up their own shelters, and they will have their own people working in these shelters. And then fourth, we have contractors that we can pull in if we need to help us execute sheltering operations. So, but like the governor said, the first priority is, if you can, stay with family and friends. What we're trying to do is basically ensure there's physical distancing from evacuees. Second is go to a hotel if you can. Third would be to go to a shelter. But in no way, shape, or form are we encouraging anybody not to evacuate if you're given an evacuation order. And so we will have sheltering available, and there will be staffing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Next question, please.
We have a follow-up. Jonah Kaplan, ABC 11.
Thanks again, and thanks, of course, to the emergency management team, almost 150 days now. The follow-up question is, when you think also about preparing for the hurricane, maybe this hopefully won't be as bad, but it could be a dress rehearsal for things to come. Normally, we rely also on out-of-state help, especially doctors, nurses, swift water rescue teams. How is the pandemic affecting this? Even within North Carolina, we probably can't get nurses and doctors from Western North Carolina or Charlotte if they're preoccupied with COVID patients. So how are you adjusting to that new reality?
We have excellent relationships with other states and other emergency management teams, and I would think that we would still want to respond to another state that has a problem with a natural disaster with our swift water rescue teams and our equipment. And I think that there will still be other states that would want to help us. The medical issues, however, are trickier, because these states right now are all dealing with COVID-19 issues. So I think that there will be some challenges there. I know Mike has been talking to a lot of people, so you might want to address this.
You're correct, Jonah. It is a challenge to get additional medical resources into the state during a time of COVID-19 pandemic. And so what we do routinely is discuss this at the national level with our Emergency Management Association. I know that the Department of Health and Human Services, it's on their radar as well. And so while North Carolina is a resource-rich state when it comes to not just search and rescue resources, but I would also say medical resources, we know that during Hurricane Florence, we did request a large number of additional nurses and some ambulance strike teams. We know that from FEMA, we can get some ambulance strike teams in here even now. The problem would be is if it was a widespread natural disaster that hit many states. So, it kind of depends on the situation. So we try to run through different scenarios to make sure that we're ready for all different types of scenarios. But I feel I'm not worried. I would say I am concerned about the number of assets that we could get in here that are medical in nature. Typically, most of the assets that we received, we didn't really get any doctors. We did get some nurses to work in shelters. But I think that probably we could hold our own pretty well if we had to. Thank you.
Next question, please.
Our next question is from Gary Robertson with the Associated Press.
Hey, Governor, it's Gary with AP. I wanted to clarify the state of emergency you discussed. Is it accurate to say that you signed a state of emergency declaration today? If so, what is the geographic scope? And why does that matter given that we have had a state of emergency for 140 some odd days due to COVID? Thank you.
It's a statewide state of emergency that I have declared today, and the main purpose of it is to get rid of restrictions and limits on highway travel in order to be able to allow utilities to bring in trucks. They're expecting power outages in this, and so we want to make sure also that we can transport needed supplies. So state of emergency also allows local governments to get ready and allows for some federal triggers. So it's a different kind of state of emergency, but yes, we are still under the state of emergency for COVID-19. Next question, please.
Our next question is from Sam Walker with Outer Banks Today.
Good afternoon, Governor, and the panel. Governor Cooper, how concerned are you with the record numbers of visitors we're having, especially on the Outer Banks, but across North Carolina's coast, with regards to evacuation orders and what that could mean as far as people having somewhere to go and people trying to go that may not even be familiar with North Carolina or making a first visit? And for Secretary Boyette, issues in Ocracoke regarding the mainland routes. You've got two issues going on with the dredging that's needed for Bigfoot Slough, which feeds Silver Lake, and the big ferries, the Sound Class ferries can't use that route right now, the bigger ones. And the Coast Guard, we did get a report that the Coast Guard was considering a vessel inspection tomorrow ahead of Isaias. Can you address those concerns as far as getting the evacuation going and proceeding in Ocracoke? Thanks.
Thank you for that question. We're going to make sure that we get visitors out of the Outer Banks if there is a state of emergency declared. We would hope that they would go home and leave early enough in order to get home so that they would not take up any sheltering space there. And we're letting the locals make decisions about evacuations. Obviously, our emergency management people will be contributing to that decision-making process. But I believe that there already is at least one local order right now that is beginning the process out at Ocracoke. But Secretary Boyette, I'll let you come forward and answer the Department of Transportation issue.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for that question. So the ferry teams have already started working with the locals on evacuation efforts there. We are currently working, and we have multiple size ferry ships that we can use and vessels in that area. So we are already working on that, and we will continue to work on that. And we have a fleet that we can rotate if we are requiring inspections. So we will continue to do that. We have a great team down there that's working exceptionally well with the locals, and they're very prepared, and we will continue to do that until we cannot any further with any of this storm.
Thank you. Next question.
Our next question is from Alma McCarty with WFMY.
Hi there, Governor. This is Alma McCarty with WFMY News 2 in Greensboro. This is a question for either you or Director Sprayberry, but I did want to see, as far as shelters, Where are they activated so far, and when will more be activated? Plus, how are people who need the shelters, who don't have any other option, how can they find out where to go based on where they live?
Sprayberry.
Thank you, ma'am, for that question. Currently, there's no shelters activated. The way that it works is we coordinate with the local county through our branch offices. They will submit a request for sheltering support. Once they coordinate where the shelter is going to be located, we'll let that county know, and they will send their residents to that specific shelter. Thank you, ma'am.
Next question, please.
Our final question today will be from Rose Hoban with North Carolina Health News.
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for taking my question. So, Director Sprayberry kind of answered one of my questions I was going to ask about medical shelters. The other question I had was about, are you giving any particular instructions to hospitals, healthcare providers, considering the fact that they might be dealing with now two types of emergencies simultaneously?
Yes, we have two places where we can set up medical shelters if we need that. And Director Sprayberry will be working with state and local officials in order to make those decisions if we do need it. And clearly our hospitals, and particularly in eastern North Carolina, understand the problems that can come with a hurricane and the medical attention that's needed. And I think that they are ready. Yes, they are dealing with this COVID-19 crisis, and I'm so grateful every single day for our frontline healthcare professionals who are out there taking risks. But I think they will be ready for this too, and we want to make sure that we're there to provide assistance to them. Follow up, I understand, Rose?
I'm just wondering where the medical shelters you said that could potentially be set up, where are those going to be?
I'll let Mike.
So right now we have a medical shelter that we can use in Hamlet, North Carolina at the Sand Hills Regional Medical Center. We basically got that medical center and stood it up in case we needed it for medical surge during COVID-19. We haven't needed it, but we've also looked at it as a place that we could use as a state medical support shelter. We have another location that we're looking at today, and we hope to be able to announce that in the next couple of days if we need it. And that shelter would be set up by Sunday afternoon, but we're not prepared to announce the location at this time.
Thank you all very much for joining us. It is likely that we will brief again sometime this weekend as the hurricane gets closer to North Carolina. Thank you very much, and stay safe, everybody.